Hi, this is Drew Jones of Drew's Guitar Shop in Seattle, Washington, and this is a follow-up video that I'm doing on this Martin from a little while back. This Martin came in with a major lack of humidification problem. So what happened was this instrument got placed next to a central heat unit, and that central heat unit did a really good job of drinking up all the moisture that was present in the air and basically robbing this guitar of any kind of relative humidity. Now, guitars like this, you want to store it at somewhere around 40% relative humidity, and this was probably stored significantly below that. So basically what we had was a top that had gone concave. It had shrunken, it had developed cracks, one big one in the top. It had even come separated from the brace or from the binding in some spots because it had shrunken so far back that it just let go of that glue joint. We also had a crack on the back, and we had a crack on the side that had developed as well. The crack on the side may or may not have been humidity related. That could have been a standard, what we call a key crack, because it's on the non-player side. It's kind of where your keys go in your pocket and then the guitar goes on top of that. It's a pretty common place to have a crack on a guitar. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and show you these repairs and how they turned out. So you can see that there's a dark line here on the soundboard. And that's pretty typical for a repair of this type on a soundboard, just in that if you put any glue at all down there, it's going to usually darken the wood because it soaks in, and it's soaked in on a really narrow and vertical line, and so it kind of changes the color a little bit. So a little bit of that is unavoidable, but you can see that the finish is nice and smooth on top here. So if you run your finger along that, you'd never know that that was there. Put a couple of cleats under there, and also repaired the braces that had come loose under here, just for good measure. And we can see now that the concave issue is really not as bad as it was. If we move all the way out here, we can still see a little tiny bit of light, but that's way better than it was. Initially, this was a huge gap. And we also still see that the fibers are kind of sucked in here, so the finish is kind of sucked into the fibers. These are kind of going to be maybe some possibly long-term problems that this guitar deals with as a result of this injury. When something gets subjected to an extreme environmental issue like this, it's oftentimes that there's going to be some issues that kind of linger. Now, the concaveness that's kind of in this area here might actually go away with time. The wood will relax and kind of come back into shape, and it's possible that these fibers may end up, kind of pushing their way out too. We're going to have to see how that kind of goes over the years. It may or may not get better, but this kind of striping that you see here where the finish has gotten pulled in, that's oftentimes indicative of something that's been dried out because the wood is shrunken under the finish, and it's kind of drawn that finish into the guitar's grains and kind of made it look this way. I'm going to go ahead and flip it on its side here and show you. There was a crack repair that was done right in this neighborhood here, and it came out pretty well. Like I said, this may or may not have been due to the lack of humidification. I'm sure that didn't help, but this is a really common place to see cracks in any case. So let's go ahead and turn this thing on its back here. And you can see where that crack repair was done on the back as well. The back crack repair is a little bit more visible than the rest, and that's just because the thing is that with this satin finish, it's really, really hard to match the sheen perfectly. The way that this spray works is that they shoot it on, and whatever the sheen is kind of what the spray naturally does. So there's no abrasive process in this, and there's no polishing like there is with a gloss finish. Gloss finish, you can always sand it down to like 2000 grit and take it to a buffing wheel, and it's going to look glossy. With this stuff, you kind of have to find an abrasive that sort of matches the sheen, and then go through and kind of polish it by hand afterwards, and hopefully that actually, does the job. Now you can see that we also fixed the loose binding, that was happening around here. We had a lot of loose binding that had, come separated around in this area. But all in all, this repair went really well. We were able to get some really nice low action on it, and everything ended up coming out pretty nicely on this guy. And so as far as the kind of damage that this was subjected to, this ended up going pretty well. I've seen a lot worse than this in terms of outcomes. And, you know, fortunately, as dried out as this guitar was, it really had only developed the one crack and the couple of fallen braces. Now, given a longer time in that environment, it could have gone a lot worse. But as it is, we managed to kind of bring this thing back from the brink and get it nice and healthy. You know, a little bit of talk to the client about how to keep this thing in the right environment for humidity. This thing should have a good long life ahead of it. Now in Seattle here, incidentally, regarding humidification, I don't generally recommend that players get a humidifier for their case unless they have a specific issue with it at their house. You should actually take a measurement of the relative humidity in your house just in case it is particularly low. Generally speaking, that's going to be the result of something like what this had, which is, being placed next to a central heat unit, or is an air conditioner always running, or something like that. Something that's going to suck moisture out of the air. Because typically the relative humidity in Seattle is pretty healthy for guitars. Generally, we're talking about somewhere between 40, 46, 45, somewhere in that neighborhood, which is fine. And putting a humidifier in the case could actually over-humidify the guitar, which causes the reverse kinds of problems. It's also a big deal. So, just keep that in mind. If you're living in an area that's really dry, you do want to humidify. If you're living in an area that's fairly moderate, you may want to take a measurement before you drop a humidifier down in there. And if you're living in an area that's super moist, you may actually think about investing in a dehumidifier. So, it's really important to keep it around that 40% level in order to keep this kind of injury from happening. Anyway, this has been Drew Jones of Drew's Guitar Shop in Seattle, Washington. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, hit the bell, link around to friends. That always helps. If you have any need for consultation with me, I prefer to get those kinds of messages through Ko-Fi or through Patreon. You can find a link in the description to those sites, and you can also drop me a tip there if you like this video and found it entertaining enough to tip me. There's a link down there to my Reverb page where I sell some instruments. Also a link to my website where you can find my pricing for repairs as well as my contact information. Anyway, this has been Drew Jones of Drew's Guitar Shop in Seattle, Washington. Thank you for watching.